Let's have a look at the details now of the LDAP synchronization and the LDAP authentication options that are available with directory integration. So first of all, we want to have a look at the synchronization component, and the idea of having synchronization turned on for LDAP is to have our appliances like the Cisco Unified Communication Manager get information about the user accounts from a database that already exists, so that corporate directory server. And of course, this would be some type of LDAP server, most likely an Active Directory server. So first of all, what we do with this LDAP synchronization is we actually tell Cisco UCM to grab the information from the LDAP and pull it in to the local database. This can be scheduled, so you can define how frequently you'd like this replication to happen. The quickest you can set it up to is every 6 hours. So it's not possible to make it happen more frequently. You can make it happen less frequently, but the most frequent is a 6-hour interval. This then allows to make sure that if a user such as John Doe gets added to the LDAP database at the next scheduled synchronization, that user account would then be replicated to the Cisco UCM, and it would contain that user account as well. Now, there is one way to make it happen faster than waiting 6 hours. That's for you to log into the Cisco UCM and do a manual synchronization. So you can hit the button that says synchronize now, and it will pull that information straight across at that given moment. Now, the mechanism that we're looking at with how the whole process starts. So the synchronization initialization is all the pre-existing accounts get marked as inactive. This is an important thing to bear in mind, because if at some point you already created a bunch of accounts in UCM, these accounts, in theory, should not be needed after you've turned on the LDAP synchronization, right? That's the theory behind this premise. So what we do is we say, well, if those accounts shouldn't need to be active, we'll mark them as inactive. We will then take the information from LDAP and we'll replicate it across. The accounts from that LDAP database that match the already existing account in the Cisco UCM, of course, then get marked as active again. So there's a match. The accounts go, well, yes, there's this guy called John Doe. There's a guy inside the LDAP called John Doe. It's got to be the same person. It links those two things up together and the account becomes active. Any accounts that are left behind at the end that have not had a match, these get permanently deleted. So anything that doesn't match gets completely removed. Please keep this in mind, because if any of those accounts are important to you, it's imperative that you go and create them inside the LDAP server so they can be pulled down and then matched. Now, the actual deletion only takes place during the garbage collection process, and garbage collection takes place at 3:15 a.m. Let's have a look at that process for garbage collection. So as an example here, at 8 a.m., we go and disable an account inside LDAP. So now we need to bear in mind of, well, when is the next scheduled resynchronization between Cisco UCM and the LDAP server? In this particular example, we've said it happens at 11 p.m. Now, of course, you can change that schedule yourself to determine how frequently you would like replication to happen. But in this example, we have to pick a number, so the number is 11 p.m. So the account gets disabled at 8 a.m. on January 1st. The same day, January 1st at 11 p.m., the synchronization takes place. This means that we're aware of the fact that the account has been disabled in LDAP. When is the next garbage collection process? Well, actually, the next garbage collection process is right over here on January 2nd at 3:15. But we don't do the deletion there for one reason. An account that has been marked as disabled or deleted or any of that must exist in our database with that status for at least 24 hours. So only at 11 p.m. on January the 2nd has it remained in that state for the 24-hour period, which means that the garbage collection process after that, so 3:15 a.m. on January 3rd, would it actually get removed outside of the database. So bear that in mind. Although we learned about its disablement or its deletion or whatever it may be, once we learn about it over here at 11 p.m., it has to remain in that state for 24 hours. And this is just to make sure that we don't inadvertently delete stuff too frequently or too soon. So after the 24-hour period, yes, then we wait for the next garbage collection process to kick in. The authentication that takes place, assuming you turn on LDAP authentication, and this is a bolt-on, right? So you need to have the LDAP synchronization turned on first. In addition, you can then turn on LDAP authentication. The reason for this is we already know that when I made the user account John Doe and LDAP did its synchronization using the Cisco directory synchronization service, it would have taken that account out of this database and synchronized it over here, meaning that this user account now exists in the local database. Yes, but not its password. Its password never gets synchronized. Its password in this particular case over here is Cisco123 with a capital C. Now, what if this user needs to do something such as a user lookup? That doesn't require authentication, so a user lookup might just be a quick query to the database and it would get a response. But if it needed to do something that required authentication, it would send the query across to the CUCM, which would then say, well, look, you need to authenticate, but I don't control your password. So what I need you to do, please, I need you to go and do the authentication. And this is where you're seeing this arrow over here, where the authentication now happens directly with the LDAP server. That LDAP authentication means that this user account over here needs to type his username and password that needs to match what's in this local database. If he authenticates successfully, then the LDAP will be able to send a token to the Cisco UCM to inform Cisco UCM that this user has authenticated successfully. So please bear in mind that even when you turn on LDAP authentication, the password never removes itself from the LDAP database. That is where it's stored and the user has to authenticate to that database directly. Now also please bear in mind there is another piece of authentication that we can include, and that is what's called the PIN number. So we can allow each user account to have a PIN. The PIN does not exist in LDAP. So LDAP does not have this concept of PIN inside of it. The PIN exists exclusively inside Cisco UCM. So that PIN will never come from an LDAP server or be replicated as part of the LDAP package.